Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Creative, and welcome to the first episode of Creative's Guide to Kensei. Um, Initially, I came up with like 40 minutes worth of content, and I decided that it'd be much simpler for everyone if I actually split it up into episodes. That way, you're not, overloaded with information and can actually focus more on details for each guide, for each episode. So yeah, we're just gonna go ahead and hop into it, and we'll start with the pommel strike. The pommel strike is done by heavy, then guard break. A landed pommel strike guarantees a light for 20 damage. Kensei's pommel strike is literally his number one opener, but it's not without its weaknesses. If your opponent dodges, do not follow up with a light. It will get parried or countered. Against certain heroes, for example Aramusha, Gladiator, and Centurion, a heavy follow-up won't work either. All of Kensei's top heavies, first, second, or third, can be soft feinted into a light, heavy, dash, or guard break. In this particular matchup, I prefer to go into superior block for a guaranteed 25 damage from a heavy. This is the reaction you want from your opponent. You want your opponent to want to dodge. Top heavy into dash guard break. Guarantees you a heavy for 25 damage, 5 more than if the pommel strike will hit. The pommel strike is Kensei's best opener, but it's easily countered. If your opponent dodges early, he can counter guard break. So just switch into light.
There you go.
Top heavy into side light for 12 damage. Also, it's important to know that if your opponent predicts your soft feint dash, he can guard break you. This only works if you cancel your pommel strike mix-up.
Are they?
From what we tested, you can only guard break a Kensei out of top heavy if he cancels into something else.
Yeah, they're safe, right?
Now we're gonna get into my number one mix-up, the double pump. I don't care to use this from neutral. As you can see, this is the general reaction whenever I use this from neutral. My opponent usually dodges early. The best time to use the double pump is from the second heavy chain, because the switch to the first heavy makes it clear that I want a pommel strike. I want my opponent to know that I want a pommel strike to get that dodge.
Right.
To do the double pump, it's a top heavy hard feint, it's a top heavy soft feint dash forward guard break. If you watch my duel videos, you'll know that this is one of my main Kensei moves, and it works quite often. If your opponent just refuses to dodge, go ahead and let the pommel strike fly for that 20 damage. One of the weaknesses to Kensei's pommel strike mix-ups is option selects. An option select is your opponent zoning on parry timing, which will allow him to parry the direction of your attack, but if you cancel, his zone will come out. That's easily countered though, if you're prepared for it. It's very important to know the direction of your opponent's zones. If you play Kensei, you're going to be pretty much very prone to option selects. Kensei's heavies are pretty slow, which high level players like to take advantage of. Kensei can also be interrupted by a light attack out of his pommel strike mixer. So it's always best to just be on the lookout for any indicators. Test your opponent before you actually get into the mix-up. And don't forget, you can soft feint into dash. Option selects are very powerful against Kensei, even just regular lights. Kensei can be interrupted out of his unblockable mix-up pretty easily. So what can you do? You can parry if you're low on health for that 20 damage. If you're not able to parry, you can also just block. I actually missed that block there. Or you can trade if you have the health for it. You can trade for 35 damage. It's super easy to interrupt a Kensei, so always just remember that, and always be prepared to at least block in certain directions, especially if you don't feel comfortable parrying. Your opponent can also choose to option select the double pump. And it's a pretty easy counter to that if you run into someone who likes to option select. You can either parry it, or in this case with Warden, you could just let your second chain heavy fly. The Warden's zone will never touch you. Now I want to go over the out of stand punishes. Off a parry, you can go into Helm Splitter and top unblockable for a total of 62 damage. Your opponent won't be able to guard break you if you parry their attacks and they fall. Off of a guard break, you want to throw forward, and this is the max punish for a total of 62 damage, but it's risky. Your opponent can guard break you. To be honest, the extra 2 damage you get from the max punish isn't worth it. I'd rather do the safe punish. Just light right after the throw into heavy. With enough practice, you'll be able to do the fast version of the safe punish. Both offer 60 damage. Now we're going to hop into one of Kensei's hardest matchups, Nobushi. The reason I say this is because Nobushi can completely shut down Kensei's Pommel Strike mix-up. If you run into a Nobushi who loves to use hidden stance to avoid your Pommel Strike, this is one way to counter that. Top heavy, soft feint into Helm Splitter. Try not to do this too often, because each time is a risk that you can get parried. Also be aware, Nobushi has pretty quick recoveries, so she can pretty much dance around Kensei. Top heavy, soft feint into heavy is the best way to deal with Nobu's hidden stance dodge. Your opponent can also predict the soft feint heavy. Best way to counter that is to cancel the soft feint into guard break. And now we're going to get into one of my basic mix-ups. You see me do this mix-up quite often. I do want to say that it will not work 100% of the time. This mix-up completely depends on your opponent's reaction.
Yeah.
So to start off, this mix-up is a double side heavy feint into Helm Splitter. The best time to do this is getting a reaction from the side. It is possible to trade though. Just be wary of that. The mindset here is having your opponent react to give you an opening.
Okay.
If your opponent does not react, he most likely knows that you're trying to get a Helm Splitter or a guard break, which means he'll counter. Reactions are one indicator that you have an opening. If your opponent just doesn't react, it becomes harder. And in that case, use Kensei's best opener, the Pommel Strike. The best time to use Nature's Wrath is after the Helm Splitter mix-up. They're going to want to parry the Helm Splitter. But remember, only do this if you're willing to risk it all. It's easily countered. It's also possible for your opponent to be quick enough to react to your heavy and block. And if your opponent has crazy reactions, he can still parry the Helm Splitter after reacting to the heavy. this mix-up is not something you want to keep repeating. It has its weaknesses. It's pretty easy to counter. It's mostly, I just came up with this for fun, so just have fun with it. And that will be the end of episode 1. For this guide, I just wanted to keep it pretty simple. It's my first guide, so I wanted to make sure everything was clear. Hopefully it was. I hope you guys learned from the guide. That's the basics, you know, nature of a guide. So yeah, in the next episode, I do plan on getting more in-depth with mind games and mix-ups and stuff for Kensei. So stay tuned, and I'll see you all in the next video.